The crystal patches on skin grew dimmer each day. Once they had glowed with bright blue light, marking him as one of the healthiest of his people. Now they barely flickered with pale yellow, like dying candles in the wind. All across the great city the same thing was happening to everyone. Stood on the highest tower of the council building and looked up at their sun. It should have been blazing white-hot in the afternoon sky. Instead, it looked sick and orange, like a wound that wouldn't heal. Dark spots moved across its surface like shadows of something terrible living inside it. Elder, the voice belonged to council leader who had climbed the long stairs to find him. The people are asking questions. The children are scared. What do we tell them? Didn't turn around. His people lived for thousands of years and he had seen more sunrises than anyone else alive, but he had never seen anything like this. We tell them the truth, he said quietly. Our star is dying. The scientists say we have maybe 10 more cycles before it goes completely dark, said. They've tried everything. Energy shields, stellar engineering, even moving our planet farther away. Nothing works. Whatever is killing our sun, it's too strong for us. Finally turned to face the younger. Crystal patches were almost gray now. Soon they would go black and then he would die, just like everyone else. Have you forgotten the old stories? Asked. Stories won't save us now, Elder. Perhaps, or perhaps you haven't been listening to the right stories. Walked to the edge of the tower, where the wind caught his long robes. When I was young, my own elder told me about the time of ending. He said there would come a day when something dark would try to eat our star, and when that happened, salvation would fall from the sky. Made the gesture that meant polite doubt. With respect, elder, those are just old tales. We need science now, not mythology. Science has failed us, pointed out. Our best minds, our greatest machines, our most advanced technology, all of it useless against this thing that's killing our sun. Maybe it's time to remember that sometimes the old ways see things that new ways cannot. Down in the city below, they went about their daily lives, but everything felt wrong. The markets were quieter than usual. Children stayed close to their parents. Even the flowing gardens that covered every building looked sick, their bioluminescent flowers dimming along with everything else. They had always been a peaceful people. They solved problems through thinking and talking and working together. Violence was something they read about in historical texts, a primitive behavior their ancestors had left behind long ago. They built their cities to grow like living things, shaped their technology to work with nature instead of against it. For 50,000 years, this approach had served them well. But peace couldn't fight whatever was attacking their star. In the underground laboratories, Dr. Lee stared at the readings from their solar monitoring stations. The numbers made no sense. Something was indeed living inside their sun, something that fed on stellar energy like a parasite. It had arrived quietly, maybe centuries ago, and slowly begun consuming their star from within. It's not natural, she told her research team. This thing, whatever it is, it was made to do this. It seeks out stars and drains them. We've found evidence it's done this before to other systems. How many other systems? Asked her assistant. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Lee's crystals pulsed with fear. We're not the first world to face this, and if we can't stop it, we won't be the last. They had tried everything their science could offer. Massive energy pulses designed to disrupt the creature, attempts to communicate with it, even plans to evacuate their entire planet to another star system. But the thing in their sun was too smart, too adaptable. It learned from each attack and became stronger. Meanwhile, in the great libraries, scholars searched through texts that hadn't been read for thousands of years. Most of the prophecies were clearly symbolic, metaphors for natural events their ancestors couldn't understand. But some of them seemed too specific, too detailed to be mere myths. Listen to this, said Scholar N to her colleague. From the scrolls of the deep past, when the star death comes with crystal teeth and shadow hunger, look to the void dark sky. Salvation shall fall like burning stone, and with it shall come the people who carry the fury of distant suns in their very bones. They will teach the children of crystal and song that sometimes creation requires destruction, and love burns when it consumes itself." "Poetry?" said her colleague dismissively. "Pretty words that mean nothing." "Maybe, but what if they mean everything?" Back on the tower, Elder watched the dying sun and remembered every prophecy, every old story, every whispered legend his people had passed down through the ages. Most of them were clearly symbolic, but some felt different. Some felt like memories. "Tell me about this salvation from the sky," said reluctantly. "What exactly are these stories supposed to mean?" Smiled sadly. "The stories say that when our darkest hour comes, strangers will fall from the stars. They will be unlike us in every way. Where we seek harmony, they will bring chaos. Where we choose peace, they will know war. They will carry fire in their hearts and lightning in their minds." "They sound terrible." "Yes," agreed. "And they will save us because they are terrible, because sometimes salvation doesn't come in the form we expect or want. Sometimes it comes in the form we need." The sun continued its slow death above them, and across the planet, the crystal patches of an entire civilization grew dimmer. In the silence of space around their world, nothing stirred. No ships approached. No signals came from distant stars. But somewhere in the vast darkness between worlds, something was indeed falling toward them through the cold void. And when it arrived, everything would change. Looked up at the stars just beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and whispered the end of the prophecy that he had never told anyone. "They will fall burning from the heavens, and their fire will either save us all or destroy everything we've ever been." Captain Sarah felt the ship shake apart around her as they dropped out of hyperspace. Warning lights flashed red across every surface of the bridge, and the sound of tearing metal filled the air. Something had gone very, very wrong with their experimental jump drive. "I need power to the engines," she shouted over the noise. "I'm trying, Captain," Torres called back from his engineering station. "The jump drive overloaded. It's fried half our systems. I've got maybe 20% power and falling fast." Through the main window, Sarah saw an orange star growing larger by the second. They were falling toward a solar system, pulled in by gravity they couldn't fight. "Can we at least control where we land?" "There's a planet, third from the sun. It looks like it might have an atmosphere. That's the best I can do." Sarah gripped her command chair as the ship bucked and rolled through space. The UES Prometheus had been humanity's most advanced exploration vessel, designed to test new ways of traveling between stars. Now it was about to become humanity's most expensive crash. "All hands prepare for emergency landing," she announced over the ship's communication system. "This is going to be rough." The planet rushed up to meet them. Sarah could see blue-green continents and silver cities spread across its surface. Someone lived down there. She just hoped they were about to meet them as visitors and not as invaders from the sky. The ship hit the atmosphere like a bullet hitting water. Everything shook so hard that Sarah could taste blood from where she bit her tongue. Metal screamed against air, and pieces of the hull began breaking away. But had done his job well. The Prometheus held together just long enough. They came down in what looked like farmland outside one of the silver cities. The ship plowed a long furrow through purple grass before finally coming to rest against a hill. Steam rose from the hull, and several small fires flickered along the sides of the vessel. Sarah unbuckled herself and stood on shaky legs. Around her, the bridge crew was picking themselves up and checking for injuries. "Report," she said. 7 crew members hurt, but nothing life-threatening," said Doctor, their medical officer. "The ship's another story. We're not flying anywhere anytime soon." "At least we're alive," said, running diagnostics on his damaged systems. "And we've got life support. But Sarah, you need to see this." He pointed at his scanner display. "The atmosphere outside is breathable for us, but there's something weird about the local star." "Weird how?" It's dying fast. Whatever's happening to it, it's not natural. Before Sarah could respond, new alarms started blaring. "Captain," said Lieutenant Park from communications, "I'm picking up movement outside. Multiple contacts approaching our position." Sarah moved to the window and looked out. Across the purple grassland she could see figures walking toward their ship. They were tall and thin, moving with a grace that seemed almost like dancing. As they got closer, she could see they weren't human at all. "First contact protocol," Sarah said quietly. "Nobody makes any sudden moves. We don't know if they're friendly." The beings stopped about 50 meters from the ship. They were beautiful in an alien way, with long limbs and faces that were almost human but not quite. Most striking were the patterns of crystal-like structures embedded in their skin, glowing with soft light. One of them, older looking than the others, stepped forward and raised what might have been a hand in greeting. "Doctor, you're with me," Sarah said. "Monitor from here and be ready to seal the ship if this goes bad." Sarah and the doctor made their way to the cargo bay and lowered the rear ramp. The alien air smelled like flowers and ozone. The older alien approached slowly, and Sarah could see that his crystal patches were much dimmer than the others. He spoke in a language of musical tones, and somehow Sarah found she could almost understand the emotions behind the words even if she didn't know their meaning. He sounded welcoming but also urgent, worried. Doctor held up her hands to show they were empty, then pointed to herself. "Human," she said clearly. Then she pointed to the alien. "You." The older being seemed to understand. He placed a long-fingered hand on his chest. He said in accented but clear English that shocked both humans, "Elder." "You speak our language?" Sarah asked, stepping forward. "We are quick to learn," replied. "Your ship's communication signals taught us much in the short time since you arrived. You are Captain Sarah. Your vessel is called Prometheus. You came from very far away." "That's right, we didn't mean to crash here. Our engines failed." Crystal patches pulsed with what might have been amusement. "Perhaps your engines did not fail. Perhaps they brought you exactly where you needed to be." More appeared from the city, carrying what looked like medical supplies and tools. They moved around the ship with calm efficiency, clearly intending to help. Sarah noticed that all of them had the same dimmed crystal patches as. "Your people are sick," Doctor observed. "Is it connected to what's wrong with your star?" "You see much for strangers who have just fallen from the sky," said. "Yes. Our sun is dying and we die with it. Our greatest scientists cannot stop what is killing it." "Maybe we can help," Sarah said. Stared at her with large, dark eyes. "Help? You do not even know what threatens us." "No, but we're good at figuring out problems. It's what humans do." "Humans?" Repeated the word like he was tasting it. "Tell me, Captain, do your people know war?" Sarah blinked at the unexpected question. "Yes, unfortunately, we know war very well." "And when you fight, do you ever destroy things to save them?" "Sometimes. Why?" Dim crystals flashed brighter for just a moment. "Because the old stories say that salvation will come from the sky, carried by people who understand that love sometimes burns like a dying star, fierce and hot and willing to consume itself to create something new." Doctor and Sarah exchanged glances. "You were expecting us?" the doctor asked. "Not you specifically," admitted, "but someone like you, someone different enough from us to see solutions we cannot see, someone willing to do things we cannot do." Over the next several hours, the human crew set up a temporary camp around their crashed ship. They shared food that somehow tasted familiar despite being completely alien. They provided medical care for the injured crew members. Most importantly, they shared their language and their knowledge. Sarah learned that they had been watching the stars for thousands of years, waiting for something. They had peaceful hearts and brilliant minds, but they had never learned to fight. They solved problems through cooperation and understanding. When faced with something that couldn't be reasoned with or negotiated with, they were lost. As night fell and the dying orange star set below the horizon, Sarah sat on a hill overlooking their camp. The old was teaching her about the creature that was killing their son. "We call it the void spawn," he said. "It is not alive as we understand life, but it hungers. It finds young stars and slowly consumes them from within. We have tried to communicate with it to understand what it wants, but it only feeds." "How do you fight something like that?" "We do not know how to fight," said sadly. "That is why we need you. The prophecies say that strangers will come who carry fire in their hearts. Looking at you and your people, I think I understand what that means now." Sarah looked back at her crew, setting up equipment and making repairs by the light of portable generators. They worked with the focused intensity of people who never gave up, no matter how bad things looked. "We'll figure something out," she promised. "I believe you will," said. "The question is whether any of us will survive your solution." Doctor had spent 3 days studying the data about their dying son, and what she found made her stomach turn cold. The creature living inside the star wasn't just big, it was smart. Very smart. "Captain, you need to see this," she called to Sarah from the science station they had set up in the main laboratory. Around them, alien scientists worked quietly, their dim crystal patches casting strange shadows on the walls. Sarah walked over, followed by an elder. "What have you found?" The astrophysicist pointed to a holographic display that showed the internal structure of the sun. Dark thread-like structures wound through the star's core like veins. "It's not just one creature. It's millions of them, maybe billions, all connected into a single mind. They've been building a network inside the star for at least 200 years. "Building toward what?" asked. "Complete consumption. Look at this pattern," highlighted different sections of the display. "They start at the outer edges of the core and work their way in. But they're not just eating the star's energy randomly. They're following the magnetic field lines, the gravity wells, the fusion currents. They understand stellar physics better than we do." Dr. Lee, the lead scientist, moved her long fingers across her own control panel. "We discovered this same pattern when we first detected the intrusion," she said in her musical voice. "We tried to disrupt their network with targeted energy pulses." "What happened?" Sarah asked. "They adapted," Lee said sadly. "Within days, they had changed their structure to resist our attacks. Every time we found a new weakness, they learned to defend against it. It was like fighting an enemy that could read our thoughts." Pulled up another display, this one showing the electromagnetic spectrum analysis of the creature. "That might not be far from the truth. Look at these frequency patterns. The individual organisms communicate using the same type of crystal resonance that powers technology." "You mean it can understand their machines?" asked. "More than that," said grimly. "I think it can understand them. Their thoughts, their plans, maybe even their intentions. The crystal patches are basically biological quantum computers. If this thing can tap into those frequencies." Elder's patches flickered with what Sarah had learned meant deep concern. "You believe the creature reads our minds?" "Not your conscious thoughts," explained. "But maybe your general emotional states, your problem-solving approaches, your cultural patterns. It's had 2 centuries to study how your people think and react." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the lab. "So every time you tried to stop it, it already knew how you would attack." "Exactly. They approach problems through harmony and understanding. They look for cooperative solutions. But this thing isn't interested in cooperation. It just wants to feed." Dr. Lee gestured at a wall covered with failed experimental data. "We tried everything our science could offer. Communication attempts, energy barriers, even plans to evacuate our entire world. Nothing worked because it knew what we would try before we tried it." "But it doesn't know how humans think," said slowly. "Right," switched the display to show psychological and cultural analysis data. "Humans and solve problems in completely different ways. They seek harmony, we're comfortable with controlled chaos. They avoid conflict. We've spent our entire history learning from war. They build things to last forever. We're willing to break things to fix them. Sarah studied the data, her mind already working on possibilities that would never occur to the peaceful. "Show me the creature's defensive adaptations," she said. The display changed to show how the void spawn had evolved to resist attacks. Energy shields, frequency scramblers, even the ability to redirect stellar matter to protect key nodes in their network. It was impressive and terrifying. "They're defending against everything the tried," Sarah observed. "But what about things that would never try?" "Such as?" asked. Sarah turned to, "Could we overload the star, force a controlled solar flare that would burn out the creature's network?" Pulled up stellar engineering data on his tablet. "Maybe, but it would be incredibly dangerous. We'd essentially be giving the star a heart attack and hoping it survived." "The risk to our world would be enormous," Dr. Lee protested. "Solar radiation would devastate our surface. Millions could die even if the plan worked." "Millions will definitely die if we do nothing," Sarah pointed out. "At least this way some of you might survive." Watched this exchange with fascination and growing horror. "You would hurt our star to save it." "Sometimes surgery requires cutting," Doctor said, joining the conversation. "Sometimes you have to damage healthy tissue to remove a cancer." "This is how your people think?" asked another scientist. "You consider destruction as a tool for creation?" "Not just consider it," said. "We've built our entire civilization on the idea. Every forest fire that clears old growth for new trees. Every controlled demolition that makes room for better buildings. Every revolution that tears down bad systems to build good ones." Pulled up historical human data on her screen. "Look at this pattern," she said to the scientists. "Humans have faced extinction-level events before. Asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, ice ages, plagues. Every time we survived by doing things that seemed impossible or insane to any reasonable person." "You fight extinction with extinction," murmured, beginning to understand. "We fight fire with fire," Sarah corrected. "The question is, are you willing to let us try?" The scientists looked at each other with expressions that needed no translation. The idea of deliberately damaging their own star went against every instinct they had. Their entire culture was built on preservation, harmony, and gradual improvement. What the humans were suggesting felt like madness. But madness was starting to look like their only option. "The prophecies spoke of people who would teach us that love burns like a dying star," said quietly. "I always thought that was metaphorical poetry. Now I see it might have been a literal warning." Dr. Lee studied the human data with growing amazement and fear. "Your species has survived by learning to become more dangerous than the things that threatened you." "Pretty much," Sarah admitted. "We don't just adapt to hostile environments, we become more hostile than they are." "And you believe this approach will work against the void spawn?" "I believe it's the only approach they haven't prepared for," said. "They've spent 2 centuries learning to defend against science and thinking, but human thinking, that's going to be completely alien to them." Was already running calculations on stellar mechanics and energy dynamics. "We'd need to modify crystal technology to work with our nuclear physics, build resonators that can survive inside the star's corona, and someone would have to fly them into position manually." "How manually?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "The radiation levels would fry any automated systems in seconds. A human pilot might survive long enough to plant the devices, but—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Looked around at the humans with something approaching awe. "You speak of suicide missions as casually as we discuss weather patterns." "We speak of necessary sacrifices," Sarah corrected. "It's different." "Is it?" Sarah met his alien gaze steadily. "Yes, because we choose to do it. We're not being forced or manipulated or driven by desperation. We're making a calculated decision to risk some lives to save all lives. And if you're wrong, then we die as we lived, Sarah said simply, fighting for something worth saving. For the first time since the humans had arrived, Elder's crystal patches blazed with bright light. The prophecies were right, he whispered. Salvation has fallen from the sky, and it terrifies me more than extinction itself. The modified bioship looked like a living thing crossed with a nuclear reactor. Its organic hull pulsed with blue light from the crystal matrices that, and Dr. Lee had spent 5 days integrating with human technology. Inside the ship's belly, 3 experimental resonators waited to be planted in the star's corona. This is completely insane, Dr. Lee said for the 20th time as she ran final diagnostics. We're going to fly into our sun and try to give it artificial epilepsy to shake loose the parasites. When you put it like that, it does sound crazy, admitted, checking the resonator controls. But crazy is what we're good at. Sarah stood in the bioship's bridge, watching the city through the transparent sections of the hull. Thousands of the alien beings had gathered to watch the launch, their crystal patches creating a sea of dim, worried light. They still couldn't quite believe what the humans were planning to do. Final systems check, she announced to her crew. Resonators are online and ready for deployment. The crystal nuclear hybrid is unlike anything I've ever built, but the simulations look good. Stellar navigation is locked in. I've plotted a course that should get us to the deployment points with minimal exposure to the worst radiation, should being the key word here. Doctor looked up from her medical station. I've got radiation sickness treatments ready, but honestly, if this goes wrong, there won't be much I can do except make your last few minutes more comfortable. Cheerful as always, Doc, Lieutenant Park. Communication systems are modified to work through the stellar interference, that will be able to monitor our progress right up until. He didn't finish. Until we succeed, Sarah said firmly, everyone clear on the mission. The plan was simple in concept, horrifying in execution. They would fly directly into the sun's outer atmosphere, where temperatures reached millions of degrees and radiation levels would kill an unprotected human in milliseconds. There, they would plant 3 resonators at specific points around the star's equator. When activated simultaneously, the devices would create a feedback pulse that would travel through the star's core, disrupting the magnetic fields that the void spawn used for their network. It's going to hurt the star, had explained to the worried council. Think of it like using electricity to restart a stopped heart. The shock might cause damage, but without it, the patient dies anyway. Elder had listened to the plan with the expression of someone watching his children play with explosives. And if the star cannot survive this treatment, then it goes nova immediately instead of dying slowly, Sarah had replied bluntly. Either way, this planet is doomed. But this way, the explosion might destroy the void spawn before it can spread to other systems. Now sitting in the bioship that they had named Hope's Last Flight, Sarah wondered if they were heroes or probably both. Incoming transmission from Elder, Lieutenant Park announced. The holographic display activated, showing the old alien's worried face. Captain, are you certain about this course of action? No, Sarah replied honestly, but I'm certain that doing nothing will definitely kill your people. This plan might kill them. I'll take might over definitely any day. The entire population is watching, said. They have never seen anything like what you are about to attempt. Some of them think you are divine messengers. Others think you are demons. I am beginning to suspect you might be both. We're just humans, Elder. We're stubborn and we don't give up, and we're probably too stupid to realize when something is impossible. Perhaps that is what makes you divine, said quietly. May the stars guide you home, Captain. The transmission ended and Sarah turned to her crew. All right, people, time to go save a civilization by nearly destroying it. Take us in. The bioship lifted smoothly from the landing platform, its living hull rippling as it adjusted to flight mode. Below them, the alien city grew smaller, its silver spires catching the orange light of their dying sun. As they climbed through the atmosphere, Sarah could see the damage the void spawn had already caused. Dark spots on the star's surface pulsed like infected wounds. Solar flares erupted in unnatural patterns, following the magnetic distortions created by the parasites. The star was fighting for its life, but it was losing. Entering solar approach trajectory, announced. Radiation levels are climbing, activating bioship's natural shielding. The organic hull around them thickened, and the crystal matrices began glowing brighter as they absorbed and redirected the increasing energy bombardment. Sarah could feel the ship's living systems responding to the hostile environment, adapting in ways that human technology never could. "This is amazing," breathed, watching the bioship systems adjust in real time. They don't just build machines, they grow them. This ship is actually getting stronger as we get closer to the sun. "Good thing," Doctor said, monitoring her radiation detectors, "because we're about to enter levels that would cook us in normal ship." The sun grew larger ahead of them, its orange surface now clearly visible as a sea of fire and chaos. Solar prominences arced thousands of miles into space, and the dark patches of void spawn infestation looked like cancerous growth spreading across the star's face. "Sweet Jesus," Lieutenant Park whispered, "look at the size of those things." Each dark patch was larger than Earth, and there were dozens of them connected by thread-like structures that pulsed with alien energy. The void spawn network was vast beyond anything they had imagined. "First deployment point coming up," announced. "Are you ready?" "Resonator 1 is armed and ready. Move to the deployment controls." "Sarah, once I release this thing, we have exactly 47 minutes before the feedback pulse activates. We need to place all 3 resonators and get clear before then, or we become part of the explosion." "Understood, deploy when ready." The bioship shuddered as the first resonator launched from its organic housing. The device, a crystalline structure the size of a small car, tumbled toward the sun's surface, its shields already glowing white-hot from the intense radiation. "Resonator 1 away," reported. "It's holding together. Auto-deployment sequence will activate when it reaches optimal depth." They flew on, racing around the star's equator as radiation levels climbed to deadly heights. The bioship's hull was now glowing like a small star itself, its living tissues working overtime to keep them alive. "Second deployment point," called out, "and we've got a problem. Void spawn tendrils are moving to intercept the first resonator." On the display, they could see dark threads emerging from the sun's surface, reaching toward their device like grasping fingers. "They know what we're doing," Sarah realized. "They're trying to stop us." "Resonator 2 away," launched the second device quickly. "But if they figure out our pattern?" "They'll be waiting for us at the third point," Sarah finished. "Can we change our approach?" "Not without missing the deployment window. We have to stick to the plan." The third and final deployment point was on the far side of the sun from their starting position. As they raced toward it, more void spawn tendrils emerged from the star's surface, moving with purpose and intelligence that made Sarah's skin crawl. "These things are definitely smart," Lieutenant Park observed. "They're coordinating their response across the entire stellar surface." "Good," Sarah said grimly. "That means they're worried. How long until resonator activation?" 19 minutes and counting. And Captain, I'm picking up massive energy buildups around all the deployment points. I think the void spawn are trying to create some kind of interference field." "Will it work?" "I don't know. We're in uncharted territory here." The third deployment point came into view, and Sarah's heart sank. The entire area was writhing with void spawn activity. Dark tendrils twisted through the solar atmosphere like a forest of malevolent trees, all focused on the spot where they needed to place their final resonator. "Can we punch through that?" she asked. "Maybe, but the bioship will take massive damage. We might not be able to escape afterward." Sarah looked around at her crew. Every face showed the same grim determination she felt. They had come this far. They weren't going to quit now. "Do it," she ordered. "Take us in." The bioship dove toward the sun's surface like a living meteor, its hull blazing with absorbed energy. Void spawn tendrils lashed at them from all sides, and Sarah felt the ship shudder under impacts that would have destroyed any human vessel. "Deploying Resonator 3, shouted over the sound of the ship's stressed biosystems. "Package away." "All resonators in position," confirmed. 15 minutes to activation. We need to leave now." But as they tried to pull away from the star, the void spawn closed around them like a net, tendrils wrapping around the bioship's hull and holding it fast. "We're trapped," Lieutenant Park reported. "They're not going to let us escape." Sarah watched the countdown timer on her display. 14 minutes until the resonators activated and turned their dying sun into a weapon. If they were still here when that happened, they would become the first casualties of their own plan. "Then we'll have to fight our way out," she said, and began giving orders that would have horrified any peaceful but felt perfectly natural to a human crew facing impossible odds. The void spawn tendrils tightened around Hope's last flight like the arms of a giant squid. Through the bioship's transparent hull, Sarah could see the dark strands pulsing with malevolent energy as they tried to crush her vessel and crew. "Hull integrity dropping," Doctor reported. "The ship's biosystems are fighting back, but they're taking damage faster than they can heal." 12 minutes until resonator activation," added grimly. "If we're still here when those things go off." "We won't be," Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. "Can you overload the bioship's energy systems? Channel everything into the propulsion matrix." "That would kill the ship," protested. "Even if we break free, we'd be flying dead in space." "Better than being dead in the sun. Do it." As fingers danced over the alien controls, the bioship began to glow brighter. Its living hull pulsed with energy as every non-essential system shut down and fed power to the propulsion organs. The ship shuddered and bucked against the void spawn's grip. "It's working," Lieutenant Park shouted. "We're starting to break free." But their struggle had attracted more attention. Across the sun's surface, massive void spawn structures were emerging, not just feeding tendrils now, but actual combat forms that looked like living weapons made of dark crystal and stellar fire. "My God," Doctor whispered, "how big is this thing?" "Bigger than we thought," replied, watching his sensors. "I think the entire network is waking up. We've triggered some kind of defensive response." The bioship tore free of the tendrils with a sound like screaming metal, but immediately came under attack from the larger void spawn forms. Beams of concentrated stellar energy lanced past them, missing by meters. The ship rolled and dove through the sun's atmosphere, its dying systems struggling to keep them alive. 10 minutes to activation," announced. "We need to get clear of the blast radius." "How far is that?" Sarah asked. "I have no idea. We're about to set off a stellar-scale weapon. This has never been tested." Another energy beam grazed their hull, and the bioship's agonized systems began failing. The organic walls around them started to turn gray as the living tissues died. "We're not going to make it," Lieutenant Park said quietly. Sarah looked around at her crew, brave people who had followed her on a mission that everyone knew was probably suicide. They deserved better than dying trapped in an alien star, but sometimes better wasn't an option. "Yes, we are," she said firmly. "How long do we need to keep the resonators stable?" 8 more minutes, if the void spawn damage them before activation." "They won't." Sarah moved to the bioship's manual controls. "Everyone strap in. I'm going to buy us some time." Instead of running from the attacking void spawn, Sarah turned the dying bioship toward them. The move was so unexpected, so contrary to any rational survival instinct, that even the alien intelligence was caught off guard. Hope's last flight crashed into the nearest void spawn combat form like a living missile. The collision tore both vessels apart, but the explosion also disrupted the coordinated attack pattern. Other void spawn forms moved to intercept, giving the resonators precious time to complete their countdown. 6 minutes, called out over the sound of the ship breaking apart around them. The resonators are holding position. Hull breach in sections 3 and 7, Doctor reported. We're losing atmosphere. Emergency life support is offline, added Lieutenant Park. We've got maybe 3 minutes of air left. Sarah felt oddly calm as she watched the countdown timer. They were going to die here, in the heart of an alien star, but their sacrifice would save an entire civilization. Humans had faced death for worse reasons. Captain said suddenly, I'm getting a communication from they're trying to reach us. Put it through. Elder's face appeared on their failing display, his crystal patches blazing with unprecedented brightness. Behind him, Sarah could see the entire council, their faces filled with anguish and amazement. Captain said, his voice thick with emotion. We are watching. The entire world is watching. What you are doing, this sacrifice, we have no words in our language for such courage. Don't mourn us yet, Elder, Sarah replied. We might still pull this off. Even if you do not survive, you have already saved us. The Void Spawn's attack on your ship has revealed the true extent of their network. Our scientists now understand what they are fighting. Win or lose, you have given us knowledge that will help us protect other worlds. 4 minutes to activation, announced. All resonators are stable and charging. Around them, the bioship continued its death spiral into the sun's core. The hull was now completely gray, its living systems extinct. They were flying in a dead vessel through an ocean of fire, held together by nothing but momentum and stubborn human engineering. You want to know the real prophecy, said, his image flickering as their communication systems failed. The complete version that I never told anyone. It says that salvation will fall from the sky, and it will teach us that love burns when it chooses to consume itself. We thought it was poetry. We never imagined it was an instruction manual. 2 minutes, said. Captain, if this works, the explosion is going to be visible from the planet's surface. They'll see us die, but they'll also see the star burning clean again. Good, Sarah said. Let them remember that humans don't just fall from the sky, we burn across it. The Void Spawn made one final desperate attack, sending every combat form in the local area against the dying bioship. But it was too late. The resonators had reached critical charge. Activation in 10 seconds, announced. 987654321. The star exploded. Not in the catastrophic way that would destroy the solar system, but in a controlled pulse of pure stellar energy that raced outward from the core at the speed of light. The Void Spawn network, built to harness and redirect stellar energy, found itself suddenly channeling more power than it could handle. Across the sun's surface, the dark patches began to burn away like shadows fleeing from dawn. The alien structures that had taken centuries to build were reduced to ash in seconds. The stellar parasites, for all their intelligence and adaptability, had never encountered anything like a deliberate stellar overload. The pulse wave hit Hope's last flight just as the bioship finally broke apart completely. Sarah felt a moment of intense heat and light, and then nothing. On the planet's surface, every watched their sun blaze with clean, white fire for the first time in generations. The orange sickness was gone, burned away by the humans' impossible solution. Where dark spots had marred the star's face, now only pure light remained. Elder stood on his tower and watched the explosion fade into normal stellar radiance. Around the city, crystal patches were already beginning to glow brighter as their sun's restored energy reached them. "Did they survive?" asked Council Leader, joining him on the platform. "No," said quietly, "but they succeeded. The star burns clean. The void spawn is gone, and we have learned that sometimes salvation requires sacrifice." "What do we do now?" Looked up at their healthy sun, then down at the human crash site where the Prometheus still lay half buried in the purple grass. "Now we honor them. We learn from them. And we make sure that when the next impossible threat appears, we remember what they taught us about fighting for what we love." 3 months later, a deep space probe detected another void spawn infestation in a distant system. This time, they were ready. Using human tactical thinking combined with technology, they developed weapons that could strike fast and hard at the parasites before they could adapt. The probe's crew included both scientists and human volunteers, survivors from other ships who had answered the call for help when the broadcast their discovery to the galaxy. Together, they represented something new, a partnership between species that complemented each other's strengths and compensated for each other's weaknesses. Elder often visited the memorial they had built at the human crash site. It was made of living crystal that grew brighter each day as their sun's restored energy fed it. Carved into its base were the final words Captain had transmitted before her ship was destroyed. "Humans don't just fall from the sky. We burn across it." Standing there in the light of his people's saved star, understood at last what the prophecies had really meant. Salvation had indeed fallen from the sky, but it hadn't come in the form of rescue or relief. It had come in the form of example, a lesson in how love could burn bright enough to consume itself and still create something beautiful. The humans had taught them that sometimes the greatest act of creation was the willingness to destroy yourself for others. And in learning that lesson, they had become something they had never been before, a people ready to fight for what they cherished. Above them, their clean white sun blazed with the fury of distant stars, exactly as the prophecies had promised.